Hello, founders. Welcome to my ongoing series on the truths, sometimes brutal truth, of what it takes and what it's like to raise pre-seed and seed funding. This is a 5-part series. I'm going to break this down into 10 truths to help you raise money, especially if you are an early stage founder or first-time founder and you're learning along the way. Today, I'm going to talk about control. And a lot of founders think to themselves, well, if I raise money, I'm going to lose control of my company. And a lot of people will give you advice and they'll say, no, you're not going to lose control of your company. It does not mean you're going to lose control. And I'm going to give you the contrary to that. I'm going to say, yeah, you lose control of your company. Here's the caveat. You lose full control, or you lose the full control of your company. So if you want full control of your company, don't raise money. Don't bring investors on, because you are going to lose parts of the control that maybe you want to hang on to when you are raising capital and you've got investors on your cap table. Things completely change. My buddy at startups.com says this all the time. Will Schroeder, the founder, check out the Startup Therapy podcast where I heard it from. And he says all the time, you're hiring your own boss when you raise money and you get an investor. And that is completely true. And that's a truth that you have to be prepared for. Before I continue, my name is Ed Kang, 7-time funded founder, 2-time exits. Just means I've failed a bunch of times, and I try to use these videos to help you avoid some of the catastrophic mistakes that I've made. It's hard enough. I want to minimize the damage and the heartache that comes with the mistakes that early stage founders will make through the course of being a founder and trying to build your startup. I've also been the general partner of multiple accelerators and funds, one late stage out of Shanghai, China, and a venture studio and an early stage funding, alternative funding accelerator here in North America. Thank you very much for checking this out. Let's get into the mindset you have to be successful at it. And the mindset you have to consider is, how much control am I willing to give up? Am I ready to interact with investors who are going to have control, legal control of my company? I've had investors write little checks and try and get so much control in my life. And then I've had investors write really big checks. We're talking $250,000 checks, and they don't want anything to do with control. They just want to leave me alone. These are the best investors, by the way. I trust you. Keep me posted. I'm willing to keep you accountable for the legal stuff, but do your thing. Even when I ask them to come on board, will you join my board? They've said no, because they don't want to be bothered. Great investors. It all depends, and that's something you want to look for when you're raising money. What I mean by you will not have full control is you're going to be accountable. You now have a fiduciary responsibility to investors, because by law, you've taken their money and you're supposed to be using it correctly for the purpose and the intent of what they signed the investment for, or what your company exists to do. On top of which, when you start bringing on investors, you're going to have a board, and that board is responsible for representing the shareholders. So not only do you have investors come in and they're on your cap table and they got control as shareholders, you're going to have a governance board, right, that handles everything from your annual reports, annual general meetings, to the minutes, and everything that goes into your corporate minute book, like resolutions, the record keeping, because that's what's required by law. You can't get around it. So now you have a board, and most of the time only the CEO sits on the board, and the rest of the co-founders aren't supposed to be on that board whatsoever, because that's proper governance. You don't want all the co-founders that have got a bias in terms of they're inside the company, running the company, not to be able to step back and make decisions at an arm's distance and take an overview of it. So it's all about oversight. Then you have to be reporting the board. Doesn't matter what type of investor you've got. If you're not communicating to them properly and they don't trust you, they can take legal action. Go to the board, get other investors thinking about it. They are your bosses. Now, hopefully, they trust you enough to let you be the boss of daily operations and all that stuff. But I know board members that want to report every single week, and they want that control for different reasons, right? Maybe you're not as seasoned as they need you to be, or maybe they're just really controlling people who throw their money around and want to make your life a living hell. Yes, there are investors that live like that. Here's your action item. Put yourself in the position that you've got bosses. Maybe you need to do an org chart. Put yourself in the middle of the piece of paper and then put a bubble right above your bubble and say, this is my boss, this is the investor. And think to yourself, what type of boss do I want? That's going to determine what type of investor you're willing to bring in onto your cap table, because you are going to be accountable for them. And then think about it in terms of the size of investment is going to determine the amount of control, and start thinking about, all right, who could my board members be? Do I know a chairman who could come in and be that person between me and the investors? Start thinking about, who would I trust? Not only are you thinking about, hey, this is the type of investor as a boss that I'm willing to have on my cap table, be accountable to, but here is the chairman that I'm willing to have on my board that I'm willing to be accountable to as well. And make a list of those potential people and start talking to them. Talk to them, and maybe you're saying, hey, if you were an investor, what type of accountability check-ins would you want from me? When I invest in a company or our fund, or I bring in a capital partner, they are very clear on what type of reporting they want. It just so happens to be the typical configuration that I use, Cadence, is a monthly meeting where I get to see the financials, and then we get to see them quarterly, and then a final report, because I have to send that in for due diligence to the LPs or the financiers, the capital partners that I'm working with. Think to yourself, am I willing to do that? How do you know until you ask them? So ask people, what type of governance or control mechanisms do you have when you're investing? And then also talk to potential chairmen of the board, chairwomen, chairpersons of your board, and say, what does that look like? What type of regular meetings do I have to have? All that good stuff. And you'll start to educate yourself on what it's going to take. And that's just going to help you make decisions on the type of investors you want to bring in, fully knowing that you have accepted this truth. You will lose the full control of your company that you're used to when you're just a solo founder, or your co-founder is the one making all the decisions. When you bring an investor, you are legally, you have a fiduciary responsibility to be accountable to your bosses when it comes to your investors. Think on it. And I appreciate if you give me a comment. Let me know what you think or what you come up with. Leave a comment and tell me where you landed, because I'm curious where you all sit now that you are digesting this truth, because I know a lot of founders, they get a little bit of shock. They're in sort of this shock and awe when they realize, wait a second, this is what I have to deal with when I bring investors on. That brings me to the last point. Talk about it. Talk about, with potential investors, what type of investor will you be and what are you looking for? So often founders don't think about that, and they just go and get the money, and then they sign up for complete misery. Hopefully you'll have a choice of the different types of investors. Also, hopefully you have raised enough and small enough chunks to get you to the next milestones. You don't have to take bigger checks and lose bigger parts of control in your company. And you've got traction, you got revenue, you've got the trust of the investors, so they leave you alone a little more. Hope that's been helpful. Not only do I want you to leave a comment and let me know, but I would really appreciate if you like and subscribe and you share this out there. If you're already a part of the community, you're with me at Startups.com or other accelerator programs that I'm a part of, thank you so much for your support. It's all your feedback and what I work with you on as your advisor on a weekly basis that inspires me to make this type of content. I appreciate all of you. Keep going, and I will see you in the next video.